Hi, and welcome to my Faithful Steps. I'm Yonika, your host, and I'm so grateful that you're here today. In the previous episode, we spoke about how life is short and how easy it is to move through our life without really stopping to reflect on what are we doing with the life God has given us. And today I want to take that conversation a little bit deeper because before we can truly understand how to live a life full of purpose and intention, we first need to understand something that I think sits at the foundation of everything, and that is who we are in God's eyes. The truth I want us to sit with today is that you were chosen before the beginning and that you are fully known. If you think about it honestly, I think one of the deepest desires we have as people is the desire to be chosen and to be known. Not just on the surface, not in a passing way, but deeply and fully known and still loved. I think there is something in all of us that longs for that kind of security, that kind of belonging, and that certainty that we matter and that we have a place. And whether we realize it or not, I think that desire shapes so much of how we move through life. It influences the way we interact with people, the way we see ourselves, and even the decisions we make. We look for that sense of belonging in our friendships, hoping to feel included and valued. We look for it in relationships, hoping to feel secure and deeply loved. And we look for it in our achievements, believing that if we can just do enough or become enough, then maybe we will finally feel like we are chosen. And in today's world, this desire has become even more complicated, especially with how present social media is in our lives. Social media is such a constant part of our environment that we don't even realize how much it is shaping the way we think and the way we see ourselves. Yes, social media can be a place for connection and creativity, but it can also quietly become a place where comparison takes root. You might open your phone without thinking much of it, and within a few minutes, you're looking at other people's lives, their achievements, their appearance, the way their lives seem to be unfolding. And something inside of you begins to shift. Something inside of me began to shift. It wasn't always obvious, but slowly I started to compare. I started to ask myself questions I weren't before. I began to wonder if I'm doing enough, if I'm where I'm supposed to be, if I look the way I should. And I think one of the most repeated questions I keep asking myself lately is if my life is somehow falling behind. And over time, if you are not careful, those small thoughts begin to become something bigger. We begin to place our identities in things that I don't think ever were meant to carry the weight of our identities. We start to look for our worth in approval, in attention, in validation from people who only see a small, filtered version of our lives. And most often than not, only see the best versions of our lives. And the difficult part of that kind of identity is that it's unstable because it depends on things that are constantly changing. One moment you may feel seen and confident, and the next moment you feel overlooked and unsure. One moment you feel you are doing well, and the next moment you feel like you are not measuring up. And living in that constant cycle can feel draining. But what if we pause for a moment and we step away from that and we come back to something that is stable, that is steady, something that does not shift depending on how we feel or how we compare ourselves to others? The Bible says in Ephesians 1 verse 4 that God chose us in Him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in His sight. And it's all done in love And when you really take time to sit with that verse, it changes everything. It means that before the world ever had a voice in your life, God already spoke. Before anyone had the chance to define you, before you had the chance to question your worth, before comparison ever took root in your heart, God had already made a decision about you, and He chose you. He did not choose you because of something you would later do or achieve. He did not choose you because you would always get it right. He chose you in love. And that means your identity does not begin with your performance, your achievements, or your appearance. It begins with God's decision. And that decision was made long before anything else. And I think there's something so deeply grounding in that truth because it removes the pressure of constantly trying to earn your worth. It reminds you that your value is not something you have to build or prove over time, but something that was given to you from the very beginning. About 2 years ago, I made the decision to step away from swimming. And it was honestly one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make. Swimming had been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. It wasn't just something I did, it was something that shaped me. It shaped my routine, my discipline, the way I saw myself, and even how I measured my progress in life. And over time, without even realizing it, it started to become more than just a sport. It started to become something that I attached my identity to. And as the years went on, as the pressure of competing, of constantly needing to improve, to perform, to succeed, started to weigh on me, what began as a sport that I loved slowly became something that I absolutely hated. And it started to define my worth, my achievements, my times, my performance. They started to determine how I feel about myself. And I reached a point where I had to ask myself the question, if I'm not a swimmer, then what am I? And that question was honestly quite scary because it made me realize how much of my identity I had placed into something that could be taken away or something that I could step away from. So for the first time in 14 years, I stepped away from the sport, from the very place where I thought I had found my identity, in order to discover who I was without it. And it was not easy. The first few months were really, really difficult. There was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questioning, and honestly, a lot of tears. I felt like I had lost a part of myself because for so long, that is what I had known. But in that season, as I slowly began to walk through it, something started to shift in me. I began to realize that my worth was never meant to be found in my sport. It was never meant to be built on my achievements or how well I performed or even in my academic success. Because those things can change. Those things can be taken away. Those things are not steady enough to hold your identity. And slowly, over time, God began to show me something deeper, that my worth and my identity are found in Him, not in what I do, not in what I achieve, but in who He says I am. And as that truth started to take root in my heart, it began to change everything. It became a foundation, a rock solid, unmovable, unshakable foundation. And I started to live with a different mindset, a mindset that says, if my identity isn't who God says I am, then I am more than enough. And I think that's something so many of us walk through in different ways. It may not necessarily be your sport. It could be something else, your achievements, academic success, relationships, expectations. And maybe that's why this truth is so important, because when your identity is rooted in God, it's no longer something that shifts with circumstances. It becomes something you can stand on, something solid, no matter what season you are in. It becomes more personal when you look at what God says in Jeremiah 1 verse 5, where he says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." This verse shows us that God's relationship with you did not begin when you became aware of him. It did not begin when you started praying or reading your Bible. It began long before that. God knew you before you knew yourself. He knows your personality, your thoughts, your fears, your struggles, and every moment that you would walk through with him. He knew the seasons where you would feel close to him and the seasons where you would feel distant. He knows the parts of you that you are proud of and the inner parts of you that you are so deeply ashamed of. And still, he chose you. He knows every hair on your head, and he chose you. What a God. What a loving, loving, awesome God we serve. And I think sometimes we sit with this belief that we need to become a better version of ourselves before we can fully belong to God, as if his love is something we have to grow or earn over time. But when you really take in this verse, you realize that his choice came first, his love came first, and his decision came before anything you could ever do or accomplish or become. And that means your belonging does not depend on your perfection. And thank goodness for that, because we all fall short of perfection. Not a single one of us is perfect. We struggle every day. We make mistakes constantly. But the good news is that we serve a God who picks us up time and time again. And he never demands perfection. He does demand obedience. So maybe today you don't feel chosen. Maybe you have spent so much time comparing yourself that it has started to shape how you view your own worth. And those feelings can feel very real and they can be difficult to shake, but they are not the truth that defines you. The Bible reminds us in 1 Peter 2 verse 9 that we are chosen people, God's special possession. That is not written as something you have to become. It is written as something that is already true about you. And when we begin to understand that, even in a small way, something starts to shift inside you. Something started to shift inside me. Yes, I still have moments of doubt, and I still compare myself at times. But I know those things no longer have the final say over my identity. Instead of constantly asking whether you are enough, whether I am enough, I begin to come back to a deeper truth, and that is I'm already chosen and I'm so fully known by my God. And there's something so freeing about being fully known and still fully loved, because it means you don't have to hide parts of yourself or pretend to be someone you are not. You don't have to present a perfect version of yourself in order to be accepted. God already sees every part of you, the parts of yourself where you are so proud of and the parts of yourself where you're so deeply ashamed of. And his response every single time is to not step away, but to draw near. And I mean, what an awesome God that knows every part of you, every single bad thought you have thought, every single bad word you have said. And he still calls you his beloved. So maybe today is not about fully understanding everything at once, but simply allowing this seed to start growing in your heart that allows you to return to it when your thoughts begin to drift back into comparison or doubt. Before we end today's episode, I want to leave you with this reminder. You do not need to become someone else to be chosen. You do not need to have to fix everything about yourself before you can belong. You do not have to earn your place with God. You already belong to Him. I already belong to Him. And that is such a reminder that I constantly remind myself of. So when the world feels loud, when social media makes you question yourself, when comparison begins to creep back in, come back to this truth. You were chosen before the beginning, and you are fully known by God. There's no one like you. He knows every single hair on your head. Your fingerprint is unique, and He calls you His beloved. So thank you so much for listening to the episode of My Faithful Steps. Until next time, keep taking your faithful steps.